Hi, everyone. I'm Jeanette Mulvey, the editor in chief of Co. by the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. We're excited to welcome you to our third episode of Co. Start, Run, Grow. This series is focused on helping you navigate this uncertain business environment. Today, we're talking about economic uncertainties, including supply chain issues, inflation, and the challenges of hiring and retaining employees. As always, you can ask questions of the speakers and engage in our polls throughout the program. Just use the tab on the right side of your screen. Before we get started, I want to thank our event sponsor, Oracle NetSuite, as well as our series sponsors, Dell, FedEx, Iron Mountain, and MetLife. We appreciate your partnership in this series. We'll start today's discussion with a conversation with a small business owner who is successfully navigating all of the challenges I mentioned in her own way, and she's going to tell us all about it. Now I'd like to welcome Alexis McSween, founder and CEO of Bottom Line Construction and Development. She's based in New York City, and I'm super excited that she's here today. Hi, Alexis.
Good afternoon, Jeanette. It's so nice to be here. I thank you so much for the U.S. Chamber and Co. having me back since the Dream Big Awards finalist. Um, I am glad to be here uh, and shoot away.
Yes, we're very excited. You have a lot to tell us, and there's a lot our audience can learn from you. So let's just start at the beginning. Tell us about your business. What does your business do, and how long have you been in business?
Sure. So, the start of my business, so as you know, we're Bottom Line Construction and Development, and we've been in business for approximately 11 years and 5 months. My business was actually created out of a somewhat of a recession. If you remember 2007, 2008, I had three projects out of the ground from a real estate development perspective, and basically my contractors went bust. I wasn't the only one in that situation, there were many of us. And that's about the time I went and sought my general contractor's license to complete those projects, and it's been a whirlwind ever since. We started out doing basic interior home renovations, we grew, and now we pretty much do government contracting work within the five boroughs for agencies such as the School Construction Authority, the MTA, EDC, HPD, which is Housing Preservation and Development. So we've been pretty excited, and I feel we've grown steadily over the past 11 and a half years approximately. Right now, we are working on about two school projects, one in Queens and one in the Bronx, here in the city, and a Victoria Theater as an interior Tier 1 sub on 125th Street in the city. And, we're pretty mission driven. So these projects mean a lot to us. They're in the communities we come from. And we're really excited about the upcoming opportunities and how we've been dealing with the challenges coming our way over the past 2 years.
Yeah, so let's talk about that. And you said you're mission driven, and we're going to actually tell the audience more about that later. But let's just talk about those challenges, because you and everyone else have been facing all kinds of economic uncertainty and challenges, and construction in particular is a very challenging business, even in the best of times. So, what are, for you right now, what are like the top three biggest economic, financial challenges you face?
I would say the top three financial challenges would be right now, today, supply chain issues. We have a few projects that are constantly having to be the schedule to be updated due to delays on equipment and materials. So that has been somewhat of a new situation for us. So what we've been doing is just really communicating with our clients, which are mostly public clients, so it can be a bit challenging sometimes. But we're totally transparent, and we actually stay in close contact with our vendors to constantly follow up with them on a weekly basis to see how we're making on time. We discuss with any architecture, engineering professionals that are on our projects to see if we can figure out some ways, in other words, using alternates, which is something that most public agencies frown upon. But we've been working really hard to find equals and alternates that are more locally based. Um, then we so that's been a challenge. It's also, people don't think about that time that it takes for your materials and equipment to arrive. You sort of have to stay afloat and sustain everything and the project while you're waiting. And so typically we would be getting requisitions in every month and having funds coming in. But when you have those long delays, you really have to plan for them. And I would say pay close attention to your schedule of values and take that part into consideration. The next challenge, because I can go on and on about supply chain issues, I would say is inflation. So inflation is hitting everybody. That adds to the supply chain issue. So that's another reason their numbers are going up, because things like gas prices, I mean, you'd be surprised, copper, insulation, even drywall is extremely higher than it was. So inflation is definitely having an impact on us. Interest rates are rising, our credit interest rates are rising, and we have to hold those credit rates for longer, for an extended period of time. So that's definitely a challenge. Then our third biggest challenge definitely would be the hiring, our human capital, our access to staff and professionals that are sort of up to date with the technology that's actually going light speed for us. Even in the construction industry, you wouldn't think so, but it actually is. There's so many cloud-based software that the larger primes are using. And if you're going to navigate the space, even though you're a smaller contractor, you have to make sure your team is educated on all the software usage that our larger primes are using. And it's cloud-based software such as scheduling, financial software, requisitions, software such as something, there's a platform called Textura, which is new to us, and we had to train our staff. So hiring, you have to take all those into consideration and know that that candidate is not always going to know the platform, but do they have the foundational skills to grasp those new platforms? So that's been a challenge. Salaries, of course, are higher. We are an essential business. We worked during the pandemic. We do deal in affordable housing. So that's one of the reasons why we were still working. So that was challenging, getting people to physically come to work. Um, that is, I would say, not only our challenge, but a challenge for so many businesses. Um, how do you how do you attract that talent? So we are considering, and we have been doing things like flexible schedules, compensation, accountability in a different way than it was pre-pandemic, more focus based on the project, and also really in tune to our staff as far as self-care, um, a caring culture, to make sure that they know that they come first and approach our clients with that same respect, but really sort of a mutual understanding that we're all important. And so that's what we try to convey when we're seeking candidates and interviewing and seeing how they feel, because it's tough, but a lot of businesses are in a tough space right now. So I hope I answered your question, Jeanette, but those definitely are three top challenges right now.
Yes, you definitely did answer it, but I would like to dig in a little bit deeper on
Sure.
a couple of the items you mentioned, just because I would love to get specific. So, one of the things you mentioned as a financial challenge was inflation and prices changing. So you're in the construction business, you have to give people estimates. You tell them in advance how much a job is
Yes.
going to cost. And I think lots of other people in our audience, maybe in other kinds of industries, have to do the same thing. You have to estimate for someone
Definitely.
how much the job is going to cost before they decide to hire you. How are you dealing with those rising prices and needing to either honor an estimate that you gave or tell the potential customer, I'm sorry, but that price is not good anymore. How are you dealing with that?
That's a great question, Jeanette. So the approach that we've been taking is goes back to that transparency piece. So when we provide a proposal, we only insert the dates that have been guaranteed to us. So right now, today, those dates sometimes don't go past 30 days. And I had one experience 3 weeks ago where the lumber yard was only holding their price for 2 weeks, if you can imagine that. So what we try to do, fortunately, most of these larger clients are aware of what's happening. And so when we give the bid, when we give the proposal, we really try to maintain that communication. So what we've been doing is once we provide the proposal, we're setting it in our calendar to reach out to that vendor a week prior to just see where we are. Usually it's not a price decrease right now, it's a price increase. We try to do cluster. So if we have a vendor that we use a lot, we make sure we try to stick with them and show them that we're bidding on other projects and we're getting numbers so that they're comfortable that they will be getting that order from us. But it is a challenge, and I'd be lying if I told you we figured out all the answers. But what I do is just keep maintaining transparency. Sometimes you'll get a bid, you'll be the lowest bidder, and now you have to be vetted. So that vetting and descope takes about, usually there's three of you being vetted, 2 to 3. And so that takes time. So by the time on a government job, you may not be awarded for another 2, 3 months tops. So there's no way you're going to be able to hold all those materials. So we try to take it right up to that signing of the contract on giving them those updated prices. And that's not always possible. But that's what we've been doing. And if they're refusing, then sometimes we have to make the hard decision of perhaps that's not the bid for us.
So it sounds like what you're saying is that communication, even though we're talking about finances, right, and numbers and pricing, that communication is really essential here because you need to set expectations with these customers right up front
Yes.
about how long this price is good. I could talk about this all day, but I'm going to move on to our next question because you also said something about technology. And no matter what industry we're talking about, everyone has this issue that technology is constantly changing, and a lot of it is cloud based, as you suggested. So that means that you can, it's economic it's affordable perhaps to change technologies or to take on a new technology, but you have to train your employees to use it. So I guess I wanted to just talk a little bit more about technology and how you make the financial decision that a particular technology is worth the investment, not just the investment of buying the technology or paying for it monthly or whatever it is, but the investment in your employees of training them, and not only how to use it, but training them to want to use it and to make it part of their process.
That's a great question, Jeanette.
That was a long
I like
question.
that. I like that. You said training them and to want to use it. That's that's the
Right.
magic statement. So the technology piece for us is extremely challenging. And what we've done is now, I don't know if it's just me or if everyone else has noticed that it seems that the technology is on steroids post pandemic. Um, and we're just like running to keep up. But what I find is that most of the technology out there, speaking of technology, so we use Asana, which is a sort of project management software tool that we use to help keep the team project based on point. And we actually use the free version of Asana right now. Then we use Procore. We use cloud based, we use Dropbox that's where we store our working documents. So let's go back to Asana because there's so many different platforms that are similar to Asana. You have Monday, you have so many options. So how do you get the team to be on board with Asana. One of the things about Asana is, and there's also Microsoft Teams you could use, but you can assign tasks to your coworkers or me. And so once people figure out, as far as getting them to like it, once they figure out, oh, we can give her stuff to do, then everybody likes it. But
Right.
but basically it's free. It's really free. They do have a paid version. I would tell any small business owner to start with the free version of anything. And then really dedicate time to your staff. So if you're not going to do it, they have people that you can reach out to through the Asana website or any of these softwares that will help train your staff. Is there a fee? Yes. Is it worth it? Definitely, because you don't necessarily need to be the one down in the weeds doing the training. The point is, the more training they have, the better they will receive it. And then it
Right.
starts to work. That's
Yeah.
so I would say definitely it doesn't have to be Asana. That's what we use. Will we transfer to the paid version, Jeanette? Yes. Once everyone is really on board and utilizing it to the best of their ability, that's probably when we would switch to the paid version.
Right. And I think what you're saying applies to any technology. If you are going to invest, because yes, there are free versions of a lot of cloud-based things, but then there are other systems where you need a more robust and paid version, to your point, but none of it is going to be worth the investment if you're not taking the time to train your employees and to show them the value in why you're investing in this in the first place, right? Because it makes you more efficient. We could talk about technology all day, but we're not going to. I'm going to move us on because we're talking about finances and financials uncertainty today, and I know that when a person, you've been in business for 11 years and 5 months, I think you said. When
Yeah.
I love that you knew exactly how long. um, so when a
It was
person
a
is
test.
just yeah, when a person is just starting their business, it's exciting when you get a customer. It's exciting when you get a job. It's exciting when you get a sale, right? But at some point you have to start assessing whether that job or customer or sale is really making you a profit, and whether it's a customer you want. So you're in a situation where you're bidding jobs all the time, big jobs, and dealing with all these changing prices and supply chain issues. Can you just talk about how you personally are making the calculation of whether a job makes sense for you, even if it's something you're excited about and it would be a good opportunity? How do you decide if it makes sense for you to do a particular job?
So yes. How do we make the decision on whether a job is a right fit for us? It centers now, after being in business for almost 10 years, it's really about what type of client, what type of organization are they? That is important to us, it's important to me. The You can make so many mistakes taking a job, and I know everyone out there has possibly been there. And you see the job, and you're like, "Oh my gosh, that's a historic." Especially, believe it or not, Jeanette, as an MWBE, sometimes certain opportunities come to you, and they might be really sort of historic or wonderful to be a part of. But sometimes the numbers just don't work out, and you have to say, "Oh my gosh, I really want to be a part of this," but I can't come out just breaking even. But you really have to look at, speak to your accountant. I hope everybody has a good accountant. So we have an accountant have an accountant that really understands your industry. So we do work closely with an accountant, and we talk to him monthly about the opportunities that are out there and where we are. So if it's something that we're really passionate about, since I do feel we're a mission driven business, like a historical museum or historical theater or something like that, and you really want to be a part of it, and the numbers seem a little close, you talk to your accountant and see where your other projects are and take a look at your WIP schedule, which is a work in progress schedule that many contractors use to figure out if they can navigate those projects that they want to take. The the worst thing in the world for everybody and it took me time to learn this because I've made those mistakes. Is what I do is always think of my staff and my team. And so even though in my heart I might say, "Oh, I want to go do that," if the numbers don't make sense, Jeanette, then I can't do it. And then be
Right.
honest and let them know, we're a tier one sub and a GC. So a lot of times, if we're not bidding on a job with multiple trades, sometimes it's not in our best interest. But really look at your team when you're
Right.
making these decisions. So between your team and your accountant, you can
Right.
make the right decision
Right.
because the worst thing is when you have to make staff changes because you tripped up and took a job. At the end of the day, it's on you. You messed up and you took a job that was not in the organization's best interest. So
I'm
you
going to
rely heavily on your accountant.
Yes. So thank you. I'm going to stop you there because believe it or not,
Sorry.
this time has flown by and we only
Oh,
have two
sorry.
minutes left. And
Okay.
I promised you that we were going to talk a little bit about the nonprofit portion of
Oh,
your
great.
business. You were talking about your team and your community. Can you just, actually, we have 1 minute left. In 1 minute, can you tell us about the nonprofit portion of your business and why you started that?
Sure. So our firm created a nonprofit called Youth Construct. And Youth Construct was born out of the beginning of the pandemic and us wanting to really provide you know, exposure to young people, 11th and 12th graders from underserved communities, expose them to their built environment from an architectural, construction, engineering, and real estate development space. Because a lot of times young people in our communities don't even understand why a building is going up. And so it's not a brick and mortar program, it's purely an ASED based program from a back office or professional space. But we're really excited about it. We have our first cohort. Um, there's sponsors and people who've been donating and volunteering their time with wonderful organizations such as AECOM and Turner and Community Preservation Corp. And we have a beautiful board, so I'm really excited about it. And I think we're making a difference.
Well, I think that's fantastic. I thank you so much. That is all we
Thank
have
you.
time for today. So I'm going to say
Thank
thank
you.
you very much for joining us. You take care.
You too.
Thank you. And to our audience, we are now going to shift the conversation a little bit to talking about tracking the right financial metrics to ensure the success of your business, no matter what industry you're in. But before we get started, I just want to find out a little bit more about who you in the audience are. So, can you take the poll right now? You'll see it on the right hand side of your screen. We want to know which factor you are tracking most closely in your business. So it looks like inflation right now is the number one choice, although it's split fairly evenly. I'm a little bit surprised that workforce isn't everybody's number one problem, but maybe we've crested that wave and now we're focused on inflation. Yeah, so thank you to everyone in the audience for voting. And I think that's a good place to get us started with our next guest. So next we will be hearing from Tom Kelly, who is the Director of Product Marketing at Oracle NetSuite. Hi, Tom. How are you?
Good, Jeanette. How you doing?
Good, good. So let's get started. Let's just talk about what you think are the most important financial metrics for businesses to be paying attention to.
Um, well, I think it to some degree can depend on the size of your organization, but I think those that are starting out, obviously, it's cash. But the other thing I would say, as far as what should you be tracking? The poll said everybody's tracking inflation. I mean, the question I would probably have: Are you tracking it, or are you aware of it? Meaning, I've seen some questions about how do you put a plan together and account for inflation in a financial plan. And those things, I think you really need to take a step back and figure out how you want to do it, how you want to mechanize it. Meaning, depending upon whatever the inflation is going to be by particular items in your financial plan, you need to have the ability to toggle those assumptions, right? So if inflation is 5% for a certain raw material or item, if wages are being affected more, gas, we know. So things like this, depending on how granular you want to get within your business, that is going to kind of be up to the individual. But the one thing I would stress is there's plenty of numbers out there. If you went to Google and you put in, what financial metrics should I track, you're going to probably get, I think, something close to 1 billion responses in about 0.3 seconds. What that means is there's a whole plethora of things you can be looking at. But I think it's most important to understand the situation you're in and drill down on those things that are going to make the most sense for your business. What are the drivers that are going to move it forward? What are the drivers you need to react to? Gas prices are going through the roof. And really mechanize that so you can very quickly spin stuff as things change. And I think in this day and age, I know everybody has got inflation on their mindset, but I think as we've all seen, things can change pretty dramatically in a moment. And I think the trick is, how agile can you be to take advantage of those changes, but take advantage of them in a way that are, fact-based, if you will, and intuitive to what you're doing in your particular industry or business.
Yeah, and Alexis was talking about, essentially we were talking about profitability, right? She was talking about being excited about a job, but if the profit isn't there, then it doesn't make sense. So in terms of financial data that businesses should be keeping track of, can you just talk about profitability a little bit? Because it's maybe the hardest thing to keep track of. You can keep track of your expenses, you can keep track of your income, but that net profitability can be challenging. Can you talk about what people might overlook when they're calculating whether something's going to be profitable for them?
Sure. So Alexis did say, talk to your accountant. I used to be I guess I still am an accountant, but I think it's important that you have somebody who is knowledgeable about it. There's two ways to account for your business, right? One is on a cash basis, which means I make a sale, I collect the cash. Conversely, there's another concept called an accrual basis, which means you make a sale, you have a receivable that you set up, right? So you recognize the revenue in the accrual business, whereas in cash, you already recognize that revenue when you get the cash in your hand. So there's a distinction to be made. And so when there's some things that get confusing, some examples I've seen over the years, if you're in a manufacturing area, or even like Alexis said, you have WIP, you have this, work in process. What can happen sometimes is the accounting along those lines, it can be pretty complicated. And in one particular instance, I fully remember that the business owner was convinced that this one product was driving 80% of their profitability. And when you dug into the cost accounting of it, they weren't accounting for it correctly. So surprise, it wasn't accounting for 80% of the profit of his business. It was actually degrading the profit, and they accounted stuff on accrual. So that, that's one example, but if you're really going to look at things, I'd say cash basis, obviously you want to look at what is the net cash balance I have in my bank account on a day in and day out basis. On an accrual basis, you really want to look at what's called an income statement and make sure that you're accurately accounting for all the line items on that income statement. So revenue, expenses, and understand what your profit is. But then in addition to that, I think it also gets back to cash. You want to track to make sure you're collecting the cash, right? Because another scenario I ran into is an organization would sell these devices that would track long haul trucking. And what they would do is they would sell the devices, let's say today, and they would recognize the sale. So the revenue was up, but then they would pay the commission for the salesperson almost within the same week. And reality is if you sold 50 of these to a trucking company, they might only install 2 or 3 of them. Well, guess what? They didn't start literally charging for them, saying, pay us the cash until they went into operation. So, you get upside down there where you're paying for something that you're not going to get a real revenue or a cash stream on. Could be months out, could be years out with some of the situations. So, you need to be intuitive with your business. I think most business owners are, but the more you can mechanize so that you can get a quick accounting, if you will, of your business on a day in and day out basis, I think the much better of a situation you'll be in terms of understanding where your business is at, and probably even more importantly, like Alexis was getting at, and as you just mentioned, should I be taking on certain opportunities or not? Depending upon the profitability or perhaps the negative profit they might derive from them.
So you sort of answered the question I was about to ask you, which is, this is time consuming stuff, and business owners are, of course, busy dealing with whatever problem they're having today or putting out whatever fire. So can you just talk about why it's important to take the time to do this kind of I mean, financial planning is a general term. So, what I mean more specifically is taking the time to understand what the data means and then taking the time to track it, or the reverse, taking the time to track it and then understand what it means and what trends it's pointing to. Can you just talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, and I think, we had heard Alexis mention there's a whole, bunch of cloud applications that are out there today. She had mentioned Textora, so thanks. That's an Oracle product. Appreciate you using that, Alexis. But let's just talk about accounting for your business. Most people assume that, oh, I just need to make my sales and whatever. But remember, you have to pay employees, you have to invoice customers, you have to collect cash, you have to pay your vendors. All of these things take time and effort. But what's also important to point out is if you do these manually, let's say you don't have a system to account for them. Imagine now it comes time where you got to file your taxes. You need to send information to the payroll, whether it's federal or state or local. There's all these demands that you have in terms of the data that you're generating, not just you running your business, but everything that's around the business, all the rules and regulations that you need to adhere to. And I can't stress enough that if you have a system in place where if I'm going to enter a vendor name, I'm going to pay that vendor with an account, accounts payable, and then the cash, clears the bank, they get paid, to have that being accounted for every single day as you operate. And then you can literally run the reports to see, hey, where's my business at in terms of, what I paid a particular vendor, what I paid all vendors, or, holistically, as I was saying, taking everything into account, your customer revenue, the expenses, employee expenses, payroll, and then at the end of the day, am I profitable and how I'm operating right now? But even beyond that, being able to drill down on particular customers that you're working with and say, oh, in terms of my profit, this customer is actually, negative profit. Doesn't mean you should then just say, oh, I'm going to get rid of a customer, but you can maybe intuitively understand, why isn't that customer profitable? Maybe they're reordering stuff or making you jump through hoops that you can have a learning, maybe go back to that customer and say, hey, we're not going to do this anymore. If you want, you're going to have to pay for this because this is extra effort. So you can become a little bit more intuitive, I think, from the data as well. But I think it goes without saying, you really need to track and understand where you're at. Probably an example, hopefully I can give everybody, I think we were all in kindergarten, grade school, etc. You would get feedback on how you were doing almost all the time. You'd even get maybe at the end of each quarter, or however your school did it, you'd get a report card, A, B, C, or D, and why you got the A, B, C, or D, how you did on particular tests, how you're interacting with your classmates and the teacher. You would get this real-time feedback. It seems sometimes when you go into business, that stops. It's like, just sell, I don't care. No, you really need to have a perspective as to how you're performing, why the performance is what it is. And probably the most important thing from that is, what do you do about it, right? So like I said, if you have an unprofitable customer, intuitively understanding why they're unprofitable maybe results in you turning that customer to a profitable customer, or maybe the decision is, we're not going to provide you with, our product and or service anymore.
Yeah. And sometimes, as Alexis said, that sometimes that's a hard decision, but it's the right decision for your company and your employees. Let's talk also about technology, like I did with Alexis. Obviously, you're a tech guy, so you're a big fan of companies implementing technology, but there's a right way to do it and a wrong way to do it. So can you sort of answer the same question I asked Alexis? How do you evaluate the return on investment? And I don't just mean money, I mean time, commitment, employee frustration at having to adopt a new technology. How do you calculate that investment and when it's right for your business?
I think I think when it's right for the business is probably going to be a personal thing for the business. But some of the, more higher level things I would talk to is, think about with the whole plethora of cloud applications that are out there. She mentioned Textora, which is a payment type of a application, particularly targeted at the construction industry. But there's a whole host of other things: scheduling, payroll, accounting, marketing, CRM systems, which is customer support, Salesforce automation, marketing automation. Everything. It's just the momentum is pretty profound these days. What I have seen, what our organization should do, I think Alexa gave great advice. If they have a free version, use it. See if it's going to work for your organization. The drawback on that is, frankly, you usually don't get that much functionality. It's very limited, and you also don't get to have that many users, right? Because software companies want to make money too. So to the extent you could take advantage of a free version and it gives you the wherewithal to say, okay, this is a good fit for our organization. I think the next piece is you really need to think hard about how do I get the folks in the workforce to use it. So kind of what I was getting at before, all of this activity that's going on, we're capturing it, we're mechanizing it, and now we can look at it. And that process doesn't require me to have an entire accounting and finance function. So the ability to use these tools to kind of data aggregate, if you will, to kind of help you with the process is a good thing. But the one learning I can tell you I've had over the years is as you do grow, and if you're in that situation, it's great, be very careful about how many of these applications you start putting in place. And the reason why I bring that up is the example I use is a variable equation, right? So a variable equation with two variables is, not that difficult to solve. If you add a third variable, it almost becomes exponentially more difficult to solve. 4, 5, 6. What's going to end up happening is you're going to have this like application sprawl where almost these applications take on a job of its own, and it's protected by the particular department that's using them. I would just express to the folks on this webinar, make sure when you're looking at it, don't just look at it because it's going to solve a pain point you have today. Take a step back, almost like we've been talking about. You want to understand how the whole business is performing. Understand how this thing is going to fit into your entire business, and understand how it can interact with these other applications. One of the things I will say with Oracle NetSuite, we put everything on one platform. So it's the front office to the back office. So accounting, manufacturing, payroll, whatever, it's all on one platform. So the need to be able to, make sure this data is cleansed and it, connects, you don't have to do that. It happens just by using the system. It doesn't mean you can't do that with other cloud applications, but be very careful about it. Make sure you're understanding and intuitively know it's a good product to use and you can connect it to the overall, mechanism of the business.
Well, just like my chat with Alexis, this time flew by, and I only have 2 minutes left with you, so I have to choose my question carefully. I think I like advice questions. So, what's your best advice to give business owners who are dealing with inflation right now? If you don't like that question, I can give you a different one.
No, I mean, we're all dealing with it, right? Even in our personal lives. I think at the end of the day, I think what business owners need to do is, be honest. I think that's what any customer would want. I think that's what your, spouse or children or significant other would want. Just be honest with them to say, we can't go out to dinner as much as we used to in the personal level, but on the professional level, people are well aware of what's going on with inflation. Gas prices are up, material prices are up. And, at the end of the day, so to some degree, I think if you have a favorite corner restaurant or store, I think you want to be able to make sure they stay in business. Just be honest. I have to pass this cost along to you. Be factual about it. So it goes back to what we were talking about. Understand what's happening with your business. And if you are going to raise your prices by 15%, you can explain right away. If you're selling your product in glass bottles, I just heard glass bottles, I think the wine industry going up 20%. So, I suspect that the price of wine is going to be going up 20% here soon. So, but it's a factual thing. I can't go in there. I don't fault the vintner or the wine company. It's a reality of what we're dealing with right now. So I would just say, as a business owner, don't think you have to take it all on and you have to be able to keep the same pricing. I think it's more important to be honest with your customer base. I think they'll appreciate that. And at the same time, make sure as when the prices come down, you follow suit in the same regard. So
Right. Believe it or not, that is all we have time for. So I want to say thank you, Tom. It was a pleasure, and I hope to interview you again soon.
thanks, Chat. Enjoyed it.
Take care. All right. So we are now we have a very exciting interview. We're going to be hearing from a business founder who turned his product idea into a very successful company. And you can now find his products on the shelves at stores like Target and on Amazon. Tristan Walker is the founder of Bevel, and he sat down with Co's very own Barbara Thau. She's the senior features editor at Co, and he is going to discuss his business's story and share his advice with you. So let's have a listen to that now.
So Tristan Walker is no stranger to business and entrepreneurship. He was a business director at Foursquare, the location app, and he was the entrepreneur in residence at venture capital firm Andreessen Horowitz. But his signature business idea emerged from a very personal issue and problem to solve. So in 2013, Tristan launched Bevel, a single blade razor system designed specifically for Black men, inspired by his own search for shaving products that did not cause razor bumps, something that was not available on the market. Fast forward 9 years later, and the Bevel's brand of men's grooming products and now personal care products are sold at national retailers from Target to CVS to Sally Beauty. In 2018, Procter and Gamble acquired Bevel's parent company, Walker and Company, and Tristan still leads his namesake business as the first Black CEO in P&G's 180-year history. So today, Bevel competes with hot brands like Dollar Shave and Harry's, but it's found its own niche, carving out a space for African American men and people of color who've long been underserved in the consumer products market. So I want to say welcome to Tristan. I'm so pleased to have him here. He's going to share Walker and Company's growth story, share actionable insights on how he scaled the business, broke into big retail, and how the company is navigating the financial landscape and supply chain challenges that all businesses are facing today. So welcome, Tristan. Thank you. So happy to have you here.
Thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
I'm curious about, the critical moves that you made to turn your idea into a bona fide brand.
So, one thing that's really important to me is to do something that I felt uniquely positioned to do, where my own lived experience could help inform the thing that I was going to create. Entrepreneurship is hard enough. I felt the way to make it less difficult is to do something that comes from an authentic place. For 15 years, I was unable to shave. Every single way I encountered facial hair removal was terrible. And I felt there had to be a better way. And one day I was encouraged to use this thing called a single blade, double-edged safety razor, used it, woke up the following morning without razor bumps on my face. It was an incredible epiphany for me after 15 years of using things that didn't work to finally have something that worked. It was a first moment of truth that was really, really authentic. That I said, wow, here's an opportunity for me to grow something for the 40 plus million Black folks that potentially will have to deal with these issues as well. And not only kind of the Black folks have to deal with it, non-folks of color who have to deal with it too. So I felt uniquely positioned given the authentic connection to the problem, my ability being out in Silicon Valley at the time to be able to raise money for a company like this. I felt uniquely positioned to be doing this at that particular time.
How did you turn that initial interest from Target into a true partnership? With shelf space and end caps in stores. I'm trying to always want to demystify that leap, which is
sure
demystified very much.
We were very fortunate. We each month will send out what's called Net Promoter Score emails, right? Where we ask, how likely are you to recommend this product to a friend, for example? And you could rate it from 1 to 10. And you could also leave comments about kind of your experience with the product. And at the time when we were doing it, I would read all of the comments, every single one, right? So we got these Net Promoter Score comments, and I saw that there was one gentleman who left this comment with a glowing review of the product. And, his email was firstname.lastname@target.com. And then 2 comments beneath that, I saw another glowing comment from another gentleman who was firstname.lastname@target.com. It turned out that the first gentleman was the head of personal care for Target, and the other guy was the head of shave for Target. Who would have ever guessed, right? Now, how do you make the leap from getting to where we were to shelf? Well, first of all, I reached out. We met them about a month later, and then 3 months later, we were on shelves. And that was because they already had a point of view about this guest. Target has made great inroads over the past couple decades, right, in engaging with kind of the Black guests. And as they thought about the male aisle, they saw Bevel as an opportunity to more deeply engage in an authentic way. So, I will be the first to admit that we were privileged to have an experience where I happened to be reading the comments from customers that day. But first lesson learned, even as CEO, read those comments, right? Because you never know the opportunities that might come out of it. And hadn't I read those comments, we would not be in Target today, most likely.
And opportunity met, that. I'm curious what the biggest challenges in this journey, 9 years, you faced in growing your business, and how did you tackle them? What comes to mind as sort of seminal roadblocks, challenges, and then meeting those challenges?
I've had to go through, reductions in force and layoffs and lawsuits and all types of craziness that, will make you buckle. But you just have to have the fortitude to get it. When I started the company, it was important for me to write down not only the values that I had personally, but make sure that the values that I had personally actually matched the values that we had for the company. Courage was the first one, right? If we're going against these large incumbents who've been around for hundreds of years, we have to have the courage to knock them down from their kind of title, so to speak. Inspiration, respect, judgment, wellness, loyalty. These are things that guide all of our decisions objectively, right? As I talked about kind of entrepreneurships being hard enough, why make it harder if you don't know who you are or the framework by which you're going to make decisions, right? So look, from the time I started the company, from raising money to having an inability to raise money, from hiring folks to having to let folks go, right? To having acquisition talks to have them go away. We've literally been through it all, but these guiding values have actually got us through it. So as an entrepreneur, I always encourage entrepreneurs to do two things. Number one, write down what your personal values are, because if you don't know who you are, your company won't know who you are. And then the second thing, I have a lot of entrepreneurs who come to me saying, hey, I want to start a company, right? And the first question I tend to ask them in response is, well, do you want to run it? And 99.9% of the time, they don't have an answer. Running a company is very different than starting one. And the quicker folks get to understanding what that means and what that difference is, the easier it's going to be. And it's not easy, but it's going to be easier.
So in a sentence, what's the difference, the important difference that people don't know, that you know now, that you wish that you knew, you tell your younger self?
Yeah, as a manager, you have to expand your capacity for empathy in ways that you would have never anticipated beforehand.
Huge. I wanted to talk about, to unpack that a little bit and take that out of the abstract. If you were to talk about the two opportunities that you seized on that led to your company's growth. So, we know that the challenges, but what were those, and what were those pivotal opportunities that speak to a larger that are actionable insights for businesses that?
Yeah. So the first one was feeling and being uniquely positioned and authentic to do it, right? Because if I am, that's a story that people are willing to talk about and celebrate and share, right? So when I was starting Walker & Company, it made sense for a lot of people because these themes, as they're related to cultural connectivity of Black consumers, technology's impact on that cultural connectivity, and the development of great brands, those are all themes that my career has been so uniquely focused on that it made sense, right? It wasn't this guy trying to take this truly capitalist approach to innovation, right? This guy did it authentically, taking some semblance of a capitalist approach to it, but the authenticity actually mattered. And then I think the second thing for me, which, I've reflected on this fairly recently, but certainly throughout my experience leading the organization, is that we have a corporation that has always been majority folks of color, majority, at least in our case, folks of color in positions of leadership at my company, certainly majority Black women too, which has been something I've been very proud of. The diversity of our employee base reflects the diversity of our consumer base. And you'd be surprised at the comparative advantage we have as a result of having that diversity. We make things that solve our problems first. We're a bit selfish in that way. But because we solve our problems, we're likely solving problems for the tens of millions of people who look like us too.
That's huge. So in 2018, you got the attention of P&G, Procter and Gamble, and which is many a startup's dream. And I'm curious about what you and which acquired your company, but obviously you're leading the company, your namesake brand. What what was the critical thing you did that got the attention of this big consumer products company?
Yeah. Well, I'm pretty sure that we got their attention before 2018. And I think there are a few reasons for that. First, we had products that worked. We had products for an audience that celebrated our meaning on behalf of that audience, right? Like we prioritize their needs first. We celebrate the transcendence of the culture across ethnicity. It's generational in nature, right? With no, what's the word I'm looking for? Um, Differences in how we actually show up on their behalf, right? So we have in this category, no one has appealed to the Black male guest as Bevel has. And this is a consumer that every single company in the world wants and doesn't know how to get and engage with. And look, I mean, I think when you think about these acquisitions or partnerships, they go both ways, right? And I'll tell you two things that were fascinating as I kind of reflect back on how we got together. The very first article that was ever written about us on launch, the title said Tristan Walker building the Procter and Gamble for people of color. And we announced our acquisition 5 years to the day of that publication of that article. And then second, as we were negotiating kind of a deal, you realize something very quickly. Our values matched. As I talk about values, literally, like if you write them down and compare them, very close. And then our missions were very similar. P&G's goal is to improve the lives of consumers every day. They serve 5 billion people around the world every day, the majority of whom look closer to me, right? And then for Walker Company, our goal was to make health and beauty simple for people of color, right? So there's a very kind of symbiotic relationship to be had there. We spoke to a number of larger companies that were excited and interested in what we did, and P&G was obvious for us, so much so that from the time we met to the time we announced that acquisition is 3-4 months. Is very quick, and I'm fortunate for that.
Yeah, so it was an alignment of an extension essentially of their mission.
Yes.
I'm wondering about innovation. I know that you guys are not necessarily trend driven. However, the consumer has changed, particularly post pandemic. How do you balance your innovation, your solution based products with leaning into the needs of a consumer in a very changed landscape? What's the story now? If we had to say these are the takeaways that we need to be following this because of the market has changed while staying within our own framework of innovation.
I think in our category, the market hasn't changed. Just our demands have been louder and more serious. We've been neglected for far too long, far too long. And that's why rather than following trends, we take this problem solution approach. Look, we have a double-edged safety razor that's been around for 100 years. There's no new innovation there other than the fact that this works for you and your skin type. Even for some of the more innovative products that we have an electric trimmer. We just launched what we believe to be the world's most advanced grooming device, a Bevel Pro kind of clipper and trimmer 2-in-1 device. Where, look, of course, there are just very interesting, forward-looking, set the trend elements to it. But at the end of the day, it cuts your hair well, it lines up your hair well, and it doesn't give you the irritation that others would, right? Simple brass tacks stuff, But we're demanding it now from large corporations to give it to us as consumers. And I think, fortunately for Bevel, we've been offering and satisfying those demands, and more important, anticipating them before we even have to be demanded of it.
Best practices in this market, a couple of things you found that have worked in terms of supply chain challenges as well as inflation.
Yeah, that's a great question. Wow, that's deep. All right, so from a supply chain perspective, I'll say it in two ways. As a startup and now working at P&G, I couldn't have imagined going through what we've had to go through over the past year or 2 years as a startup. I am wholly empathetic to what that means, right? Because a lot of the supply chain infrastructure prioritizes the big companies, which means that you're left behind. You are cash constrained, right? It's hard to be very flexible and agile, and consumers are demanding things, you know? So I kind of say what I'm saying with the understanding that I am in a truly privileged position as a P&G partnered company now, right? Where we have less concern about that because P&G is a global diversified business with scale, right? So
I'm sorry to interrupt you. What can you say that is applicable or adoptable for those smaller businesses or startups?
Yeah. I think the thing that's really important to remember and realize is a lot of us are doing too many things, right? And what these past 2 years have taught us is that there has to be a back to basics experience. And entrepreneurs are very optimistic, and they should be, right? But they're optimistic until they have to experience a 3 standard deviation move that we would have never thought, i.e. a pandemic that's global, where supply chain shuts down. So I think when I go back to this idea of humility, make room for the worst happening, right? And the best way to do it is to simplify your infrastructure. So even throughout the kind of pandemic, we've had to simplify our infrastructure. The number of SKUs we've had, the number of color variations that we have, the number of manufacturers that we work with, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Simplification always works better. And that simplification allows you to conserve cash. You have to hire fewer people, right? So in times like this, you don't have as much volatility. So again, I'm very fortunate, at least within the larger company that's diversified, to hedge some of those mistakes. But know that as an entrepreneur or even a leader in a growth company, you're going to make mistakes, and sometimes mistakes will happen to you as opposed to your being the cause of it. And simplification is always the easiest way to get around it.
What's a piece of advice that might surprise a viewer, but it's so, or that goes unsaid, and from your own particular experience, like, oh my God, this is such a helpful thing that I wish I knew when I was growing my business? What would you tell an audience of, the next startup that wants to be in Target or or across industries? What would you say that's not said that from an insider perspective?
I'll give the advice that I always give. I mean, to me, it came from Tyler Perry, actually. And I always give the example of, something he said when I was in LA with him. We're kind of talking to small business owners just about entrepreneurship. And Tyler, I mean, he's one of the most incredible entrepreneurs ever, right? So there's one small business owner that raised their hand. She said, Mr. Perry, you go through all these trials and tribulations as an entrepreneur. Like, what do you do to get back up when you go through them? And what he said next was so profound, right? That like it just stuck with me and will continue to. He said he recognized his potential as an entrepreneur when he understood that the trials you go through and the blessings you receive are the exact same things, right? Those trials are lessons, those lessons are blessings, and you have to appreciate them. And the reason it was so resonant for me is I tell entrepreneurs too, and this might come off as taboo, entrepreneurship, management, being a CEO sucks. It is the worst job in the world. It's terrible. It's misery. But it is the most rewarding thing I've ever had to do, and I can't see myself doing anything else, right? So you have to, if you're going to do this, you have to recognize and respect the math that I had talked about a little earlier. You have to recognize that things can happen to you that are unexpected. But now, having gone through all this stuff, I've gone through things that 99.9% of the world has not had the ability to. And that just makes me all the wiser. It makes me a better CEO. It makes me a better husband. It makes me a better father. It makes me a better son. It makes me a better leader at large. So if you lean into the trials as blessings, it's only going to compound a positive impact on your experience. And I think it will make the entire experience all the more rewarding.
That's terrific. It is profound. The hurdles are the blessings if we can learn from them, essentially.
Correct.
Right?
Correct.
And
they build patience.
Exactly. I'm so pleased. I don't want to say goodbye, but that's all the time we have. You've been a delight. Thank you so much, Tristan.
Thank you.
As always, a fantastic interview from Barbara Thau. Thank you to Alexis, Tom, and Tristan for joining us for this third edition of Start, Run, Grow. We hope we answered all of your questions today. Again, I want to thank our event sponsor, Oracle NetSuite, and our supporting sponsors, Dell, FedEx, Iron Mountain, and MetLife for helping us bring you this program today. We hope you will check out and the resources we curated especially for you, located at the bottom of your screen and in your inbox very soon. You will also be receiving an invitation to our Small Business Month programming that takes place throughout the month of May. It will include a small business update on May 5th and the next episode of Start, Run, Grow on May 19th, which will focus on helping you use video content to market your business. That's it for today. Thank you all so much. Have a great day.